As the slide suggests, my name is Ben Sandman. I am the Global Vice President of Professional Services for MongoDB. I've been at MongoDB for close to 10 years, so a very long time. And when I joined, MongoDB was still pre-IPO. We had a team of about 10 consultants, a glorified SWAT team that was flying all over the world and fixing issues. And I've had the luxury of seeing how your professional services organization always has to adapt and change their vision and their strategy, not only as your company grows, but as the market dynamics change, and really as your company strategy changes as well. And so what I want to talk about today is modernization, and specifically how MongoDB thinks about modernization from a professional services perspective. And so the assertion that I have up here on the slide is that replacing a database, and you can replace database with your product or whatever domain you're in, but replacing a database has minimal value if the periphery, so all of the components and applications and all of the other things that go around a database and the business processes remain the same. And for some of you in the audience, you might go, well, duh, that seems pretty intuitive. But I would challenge you to think about your own professional services offerings. I bet a lot of them are really focused on your core product. And to be fair, a lot of that has to do with the journey and the evolution of your company as a whole. So if you're a very small company, there's a higher likelihood that your product isn't that robust yet, and you're spending a lot of time fixing bugs and issues, and the customers out there aren't very good at your product yet, so you have a lot of tactical advisory services and professional services. You might use SIs for everything else. But when you get to a certain point, the only way to do proper product takeouts and become a standard within a company is you have to think bigger than that. The bottleneck to expansion isn't going to be your product. It's going to be what's your strategy for being able to handle and modernize that entire periphery. That becomes the bigger barrier. And I'll give you an example. If somebody's running on 15-year legacy architecture, they likely haven't moved to a more modern database for really good reasons. It's very tough to do. And you can't just go in and swap out the database. You have to be able to have offerings and thought leadership on how do you do all of these other things as well. And if you can't do that, they're never going to move to your product. And so what I have up here is a slide, and I'll come back to this later, but I have to teach our sales team this a lot. Everybody focuses on the tech spend. But when you really think, so Atlas is our SaaS product. And when we go in with customers, everybody focuses on the value proposition around the software. And what does it mean if we just swap out a relational database with a non-relational database? But that typically represents 5% of their spend. The developers and the processes and the inefficiencies around that represents 95% of the spend. So if you want them to move to your platform and all you're doing is targeting the 5%, you don't have a very good pitch. And so you have to think about how does your company attack that 95% to get them over to you. So what we've done at MongoDB is we've spun up, I don't know why I'm looking back there, I forgot that I have this monitor right in front of me. So what we've done at MongoDB is we've spun up something that we call the Modernization Factory. And it's an organization, an in-house organization, where all we do is focus on modernization from end to end. So not only the data storage, the database, but the entire application development process. And it's a very engineering-led approach, and it heavily uses AI. And AI was the true inflection point for us here. And I'd heard a couple references to this already. I liked how people are talking about 25 months and 30 months. It's not as if MongoDB or other companies aren't thinking about modernization already. We do have some in-house developers. We have partnerships with SIs. We've actually bought a more minority stake in boutique SIs globally so that we can start helping write code in microservices around the database. But AI has changed all of that. I'll give you an example. But pre-AI, our pitch was, okay, you want to move off the mainframe. You want to move off of this legacy architecture. You think it's going to take you 30 months. Our competitor, product X, thinks it's going to take 26 months. And if we give you some really good developers, we think it's going to take 22 months. It's still shrinking from 36 months down to 22 months, but the risk is that's probably not good enough. There are going to be internal detractors who like staying in their comfort zone. There are going to be executives who are worried that they can get fired. if they make a bad decision here. And if the best thing you can do is offer 22 months with a bunch of risk, that's not good enough. But with AI, we've been able to take that, let's say 30, 26, whatever months, and shrink it down to 4 months. And when you're doing that, that's a completely different story. Because now somebody's not looking at getting fired, they're looking at, I can be the hero, I can be the one getting promoted, I can finally move us off of this legacy architecture that we've been desperately trying to get off of for 15 years, and we can go do this. So, I'm going to spend some time talking about how we do that. But before I jump into the specifics, I wanted to have this slide to zoom out a little bit because I'm going to challenge all of you to start thinking about what are your product offerings around AI? Because more often than not, what we see is when companies, and definitely our customers, but even software vendors think about AI, their first instinct is to think about how can I help this to speed up my own processes? How can I use internal toolings or focus on delivery execution? And that's all good. But again, the assertion here, and again, we had a couple references to it, we really think, MongoDB thinks in the next 2 to 5 years, people aren't just going to be choosing products because it's a better product. They're going to be choosing it because they're leveraging AI and they have the ability to do transformation. That's what's actually going to bring you into your product stream. So if you're not already getting pressure, you're soon going to get pressure from your board to have some services offerings on how you can leverage AI to tackle that periphery and those other barriers around your product. And so what was our evolution? How did we get to focusing full tilt on AI application development? And so first, logically, our approach was, hey, if we're going to invent some new SKUs or some new templates from a professional services perspective, why don't we focus on data modernization? We're a database, after all. And it's probably not true as much anymore, but a lot of companies at the beginning of AI thought, well, we have these big data lakes. We're just going to draw an arrow to this box over here and, put the data in AI and magic happens and AI works. But we know that's not true. You have to clean your data. You have to segment your data. You have to prep it. So since we're a database, we'll create some packages around that. And then RAG became the big thing, and we're a vector database. We're a general purpose database. So there's going to be a lot of integrations into MongoDB. So if we have some offerings around that, theoretically, that provides value to our product and is an additional revenue stream, not only as a services organization, but to our product. But what we went back to, and I would encourage all of you as you think about your AI offerings, focus on what is the biggest barrier to your product adoption. Again, if you're early on, maybe you have years of organic growth, but eventually you're going to hit a saturation point where the only way you win these additional workloads and transformations is you have to remove these barriers. And I think AI is a very good opportunity to do that. So that's why we focused on app development with AI. So what I have here is a table that walks through various sectors, segments of application development, and what is the AI impact on these. And the reason I show this is there's a tendency to think of code generation only when you think about AI. And I'm going to frame kind of a customer example for you so this all makes more sense. So we were working with a large insurance provider, and they wanted to modernize. It's typically for 10 to 15 years, they really wanted to move over to MongoDB. Their biggest issue is they had 2,000 stored procedures. They were all written in PL/SQL. And if you're going to move to a modern database, then logically what you want to do is take the business logic embedded in that PL/SQL and move it to JavaScript, Java, TypeScript, Python, something else. So logically, we started with CodeGen. We already had some modernization capabilities, but we came to them and said, you know what, we're getting pretty good at AI. We think we can come in and generate some code very quickly from your PL/SQL into Java. They had picked Java. So we started with the CodeGen. But the trouble that you get into is it's not just that easy. You have to do a whole bunch of analysis before you can even get to the CodeGen part of it. So now you have human beings going and looking through all of the code for 2,000 stored procedures. And that cascades very quickly because the stored procedures have a tight coupling to the underlying schema. And they're called by a whole bunch of different batch jobs and other, microservices, and there's things making random REST calls to it. So now you're employing humans to spend a ton of time analyzing the legacy system. And then theoretically, they have to input that all into some system that generates code. But now you got to go create tests for it, because if I'm moving off of a legacy system over to you, and there's all of this spider web of tech debt,